Hi, my name is Harry Toozle, and I want to ask you how you would feel if you could outperform the people you compete with, or even your workmates, or some other competition, by 8% in the first year and 31% in the second year. Even better, how would you feel if you outperformed them by 27% in the first year and 57% in the second year? Now, this is not what I promise you, but this is the results that can be achieved with optimism and a change of attitude. Now, how did I get to these figures? Let me tell you the story. There was a Professor Martin Seligman, and he's still at the University of Pennsylvania, a professor in psychology, who was approached by one of the largest insurance companies in the United States. And they asked him to help them improve the success rate of their salespeople, the ones they were hiring. They were administering 2 tests which were not that good at predicting success. And he came and he measured people on optimism. And this is what happened. They tested 15,000 people. They then appointed just over 1,000 to pass the 2 normal tests. But they also tested those 1,000 on optimism, dividing them between the higher performing ones in optimism and the lower ones, which they call the pessimists. But they also did another thing. They took 127 people who failed the 2 normal tests, who would not have been appointed by the company normally. And they took these people who were scoring at the top of the optimism scale and appointed them. And they sat back and they watched. And these are the results they got. The optimists outperformed the pessimists by 8% in the first year, and by 31% in the second year. Now that was for the large group. More startling is the people who were appointed that would not normally have been appointed. A small group of 127 outperformed the pessimists by 27% in the first year and 57% in the second year. Now that gets my attention because I like to focus on results. I think we can argue about many things, but we cannot argue when someone achieves a result. A measurable, unarguable result. And I believe if we change our attitude and become more optimistic, we can achieve better results. Not necessarily those differences. And my focus is not on just hiring people better, but on you performing and increasing your optimism and your attitude so that you can benefit from that, not just now, but in the future and in the whole life. So what I'm going to do shortly is take you through some PowerPoints that you can listen to and look at. I'm going to show you about attitude and optimism and how that all works. I'm going to give you the theory and we're going to work through it in an example. Now, while I'm saying that to you, you should have a workbook with you, which I will talk about again shortly, but you don't need the workbook just now. So have a look and bear with me for a few minutes while you're watching the PowerPoints that's about to come. Now, you will by now deduce that I believe that optimism and a good attitude is one of the foundations for success. And if we pour the foundations properly, we will probably build a much more successful life and a future for ourselves. So I'm going to talk about attitude, what it is. I talk about optimism and what determines optimism. Both of those, hopefully, will generate hope. I'm going to talk about building optimism, which is as easy as A, B, C, D, E. Now, I will also take you through a worked example, but first I'm going to explain it. Right, you now have a very brief idea of what I'm going to look at. Now, what you should also have eventually, and you can stop your audio at any point in the video, and you should have this guidebook that I would have either sent you, or you can download it from my website on the internet. Now, I have 2 websites. The one is www.maxtron.co.nz, and the other one you can look at is www www.masteryourbusiness, that's one word, .co.nz. Now, what I'm going to do in the rest of the PowerPoints is go through the background on what creates optimism, what attitude is, and a simple technique for increasing your optimism. The whole idea is for you to get those percentage increases in your own life. So this simple technique, I believe, if you make it a habit of your life, will tremendously help you. So with that, have a look at the PowerPoints to come, and after that, I will be with you again, and we will go through a worked example. Now, welcome back to these slides. Now, the first thing is, what is attitude? And here is a simple explanation. Attitude is the bit that you can see lying there. It is determined by your feelings, your beliefs, and how you intend to behave. Now, usually you have some perception of how you experience the environment, and that translates into how you behave. And there's a process by where we get to behavior, which is reason, the intellect, thinking, and emotion. Now, that's quite simple. Emotion tends to be episodic. You get very angry, very happy, but it dissipates much quicker. Feelings and beliefs tends to hang around and stick around much longer. And they, together with how you intend to behave, determine what your attitude is. You can soar with the eagles rather than scratch with the turkeys by developing good attitude and building optimism. Now, I'm going to talk in the next slides about the elements of building optimism. Optimism is determined by what people call explanatory style, and it's a simple question: how do you explain events to yourself? If you're the little man in the glass, how do you explain that to yourself? And I'm going to look at three aspects. The first is personal. Do you personalize bad events? Do you ascribe bad events to yourself? Do you blame yourself all the time? The example could be if there's a sales proposal that's rejected. I'm a total idiot who is incompetent to make successful sales calls, which blames yourself totally. Or it says, well, it's not totally my fault. I had no luck with that person. Now, I'm taking sales because sales can be fairly taxing and demanding, and it's one of the professions, if it's especially door-to-door insurance sales type of thing, which requires quite a bit of resilience. And that's why you need optimism. The next one is permanent. Do you believe that bad events are permanent or temporary? Do you think it's forever or a passing phase? And the example again could be if you get a sales proposal rejected, I will always get a negative response. Or it could be that person has had a bad day, or it was the wrong time of the day for that particular type of proposal. So it's not forever, it is just this passing phase as one instance. Or do you make it pervasive or universal, which is the everything mentality? Do you believe it's all-encompassing, or do you believe that the bad event is limited in extent? Again, an example, you can say, no one likes my product, which is pervasive, universal, everyone, everything, the whole world. Or you can make it more specific. That person did not like my product. There may be more out there, and a good number of them will be interested in and buy my product. So explanatory style, how you explain events to yourself, determines your level of optimism. Personal, permanent, pervasive. Now the obvious one there is, don't take everything personal. Look at other reasons for why it went wrong. Don't make it permanent and forever, saying, well, it's this instance, it's a passing phase, and don't make it pervasive. Everyone, everything, the whole world. No, that person, that specific event again. Now, developing optimism in ABCDE. First of all, tune into your internal dialogue. How do you talk to yourself? Your self-talk. What do you say to yourself? What do you think? And then I'm going to talk about that technique, ABCDE. And we will work through that at the end as a little worked example. Now, when you have adversity that you face, something that went wrong, some bad event, how do you respond to it? That's the first thing. So that's the first part of ABCDE. How do you react to adversity? What do you think this fellow wants to do to you? What is your belief about that bad event or the adversity you face? The whole world is exploding, everything has gone wrong. What is your belief? Now, your belief can be rooted in explanatory style, but I'm not going to link that quite yet. Just get through this. Consequences of the belief. If you believe that you're an idiot, your consequences is you will never try anything. If you believe the sky is going to fall on your head, maybe you will never walk outside again. Now, you can dispute the belief by, number one, looking at the evidence, which that fellow in the beginning wasn't as angry as he looked. He was just dead tired and wanted a nap. You can look at the alternatives. There aren't one route to success. There isn't one way to interpret bad events. There are other ways. There's other methods of looking at it. You can look at the implications of what you are believing. Will what you believe support you? Or will it cause you to become totally and utterly despondent? Then you can look at the usefulness of the belief, right? Do they promote your welfare, your interest, or are they contrary to your interest? Do they make sense? Or are they like that little garden gate over there that makes no sense where it is? If it makes sense to you, you should be worrying right now. And if you go through that dispute, this is what happens. You get energized. You go to yes. You get some excitement in your life. Now, I just want you to listen to a few things, and then we will move on to the next bit. Now, what you see in front of you, you must also look at in the back of your guidebook. Because I'm going to ask you, when I do the example, to use this one, explanatory style, which is the first half. So I'm going to ask you to look at how you state the problem and restate it, and rather than make it personal, permanent, and pervasive, make it something else than your own fault. Don't make it permanent, make it temporary, and don't make it pervasive, make it something specific. And again, when you go through this technique, A, B, C, D, E, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. What is the adversity? What is your belief? What's the consequences of that belief? In particular, I want you to dispute in such a way and deliberately change the beliefs to be more positive, hopeful, and optimistic. And use explanatory style in here if that makes sense. Evidence, alternatives, implications, and usefulness. Right. You've just gone through what one can call the theory. And what I want you to do now is take your guidebook, the last page, and the last page will have that information on it. Now, don't worry too much about seeing it. You would have seen it, and you will see it on my PowerPoints. But there's two things you can look at: explanatory style and the ABCDE technique. Now, very simply put, what I want you to do is imagine some form of adversity or problem or something that just went bad for you. And what we are going to do is change our explanatory style in an example, and I'm going to talk you through it slowly. And we are going to talk about disputing your beliefs. Now, what I want you to do is deliberately put an optimistic spin on the whole thing. So change all the answers and challenge your beliefs in a way that is more optimistic and challenges your beliefs. Rather than saying, well, this is a realistic thing I am thinking of, so I don't want to change it. Because remember, what we are trying to do is develop a habit of being more optimistic. So if you want to go back to be a pessimist later on, you can do it. But I would suggest develop the habit of being an optimist. With that said, let's go through the videos and through the PowerPoints and do a simple worked example for you now. Okay, let's now work through an example. We're not going to take that long to do it. You should have the page where explanatory style and ABCDE techniques is done available in front of you. Now, let me just talk about explanatory style first again. Now, think of something that's happened to you that you would describe as bad. A knockback from a client, a knockback from a prospect, some negotiation you're involved with, you had a knockback. So what's your belief about that?
right? Now, how do you explain this event to yourself, right? How do you explain it to yourself? Do you make it personal, it's all your fault, or do you look at something external? Do you make it permanent? Now, I would suggest make it external, just as a habit. You may dispute even that right now and say, well, no, actually, there's a big problem here. Try this and see if it changes you to become more optimistic. Now, instead of making it permanent, say, well, this is just a temporary thing. It's a passing phase. This too will pass. And instead of making it pervasive or universal, tell yourself that it's going to be something specific. It is something specific. It is not the whole world that is ending. And I remember when we do A, B, C, D, E, that A, B, and C is about really explaining your belief about what's gone wrong and the consequences of that. And disputing is about changing the belief, which then will hopefully bring you that little bit of energy. What is the adversity facing you? What is your gorilla? What's the thing that you think is a problem? Write it down. What's your belief about it? I would suggest you have a different belief to what's in that picture. The world is not ending. Maybe just one tree fell down. The whole suburb isn't burnt down. One house burnt down. I do not know what your adversity is, but think of the belief you have. And just write down the next. What's the consequences of those beliefs? And often beliefs about bad events are negative beliefs. So what's the consequences of those negative?
What you've just done is go through the first bit, A, B, C. What's gone wrong, adversity, what's your belief about it, what's the consequences of that belief. Now remember, I just want to briefly remind you now, you're going to dispute that belief. And I want you to deliberately take a very optimistic approach to this. Because the whole purpose of this exercise is not to get an answer to this problem, or not to fix this particular problem, but to develop a habit for optimism. And a habit that will change your attitude over time and for life. So with that said, do the next bit where I'm going to ask you to dispute the beliefs you tend to hold.
Now, to dispute your belief, what is the evidence for what you say? Is there real evidence? Or are you making assumptions, or do you think that's the way it is? What's the alternative to what you're believing? If you believe that summer will never end, is there an alternative to that belief? Can you put your things into more positive context rather than saying, now what's the implications? If you keep on believing this, it's almost like consequences. Will you have energy? Will you thrive? Will you carry on? And well, how useful is that belief? Now look at your belief. Is it useful? Will this belief help you succeed? Will it energize you? Will it take you somewhere? Or should you change it? Now, what you should do with these four things is change the beliefs. Rewrite what you believe in such a way that you make it more useful, that you make it more such that the consequences is acceptable. Now, hopefully, if you do all of that, this should be the result. Now, I have a few closing words to talk about this, but I do wish you well, and really remember, make this a habit. This is not a teaching thing as such, but a little thing to tell you how to change something that is a fundamentally good habit to have, which is a good attitude. Thank you for listening so far.
Right, you've now gone through the whole exercise. So all I want to do now is just remind you of what you've just done and why you've done it. You have not done it to get an answer to one particular problem, but to develop a habit that will create greater optimism. Why do we want to create greater optimism? Because I believe we would all like to improve our attitudes. So your attitude is all about what you feel, what you believe, and how you intend to behave. And that will be markedly improved. And I think intention to behave has to do with believing that the next time is better. The next time someone will say yes. That requires optimism and resilience. And therefore, you've gone through the optimism, especially the dispute bit. And remember, on page 6 of this workbook, there's a whole summary of the whole method. And on the last page, you should use that in the beginning to develop the habit. Once it becomes a normal habit you just do, you don't need the workbook anymore. Right? So remember, dispute, evidence, alternatives, implications, usefulness. With that said, I do hope that you make this a real ingrained habit whereby you are deliberately more optimistic. This is not about becoming an optimist in the face of realistic, dire situations. This is about making that small change which will have a remarkably great change in your results. And remember that figures I quoted you in the beginning. Now, you want to put yourself in the position of the top bits of the optimism scale, because that's the position where performance happens. Best of luck, and I do hope this goes all well for you. Thank you very much for listening.